Imagine you're a young child, lost in the dense wilderness of Northern California. You're terrified when suddenly you stumble upon what looks like your grandma. Finally, you're safe. But as you get closer, something feels off. She doesn't quite look right. Her movements are strange, and she starts saying things that don't make sense. You realize that despite her appearance, this isn't your grandma at all. This is the story of a 3.5-year-old boy who we'll call John, who went missing near Mount Shasta and returned with a bizarre tale. One that involves robots, aliens, and mysterious underground worlds. In October 2011, John's family was camping near a popular fishing spot in the shadow of Mount Shasta, a place steeped in odd stories and myth. For most of the day, it was a normal, peaceful trip. John was playing near the campfire with his sister. His parents were nearby, and everything seemed perfectly safe. But this feeling of safety wouldn't last. John's sister turned from John for only a few seconds, but when she looked back, he'd vanished into thin air. His family started searching frantically, calling his name and looking in every direction. Initially, they'd suspected he'd been abducted by fellow campers, but a search of all nearby tents and campsites turned up fruitless. Minutes turned into hours as night began to fall. John's family were terrified. Mount Shasta, while beautiful, is an unforgiving wilderness. The mountain's terrain is rough, and the temperatures can drop quickly after sunset. With their son missing for hours, the family feared the worst. Search and rescue teams were brought in. They scoured the area with dogs, flashlights, and thermal imaging equipment. Time was ticking, and every minute that passed made it more likely that the boy could be in real danger. They searched for hours, but as the night dragged on, hope started to fade. Then around 12:45 a.m., rescuers found John. He was huddled in a bush, not far from his family's campsite, shivering and scared, but miraculously unharmed. The relief his family felt was overwhelming. It was a happy ending, or so they thought. Little did they know, the strangest part of this story was yet to come. About 3 weeks after the incident, John was staying at his grandmother's house. His real grandmother, Kathy, whom he lovingly called Cappy. Out of the blue, while playing quietly, he said something that shocked her. "I don't like the other grandma, Cappy," he said. Naturally, Kathy was confused. She asked him what he meant by the other grandma. "Well, the other grandma, Cappy, grabbed me and took me to a creepy place. She's really a robot." Naturally, Kathy thought her young grandson was just using his imagination. But as his story went on, Kathy began growing concerned that her grandson might be telling the truth. John explained that when he was lost in the woods, he encountered what he thought was his grandma. At first, John followed her, thinking it really was his grandma. But soon, he regretted his decision. It was a cave with spiders, and there was purses and guns, John explained to his real grandmother. "I was too scared, so I didn't touch anything. But when she climbed a ladder, the light made her look like a robot. There were other robots too, but they didn't move." John said the robot grandma made bizarre requests, asking him to lie down, trying to examine his stomach. She also asked him to defecate on a piece of sticky paper. When he couldn't, she grew frustrated and impatient. But the strangest part of all? The robot Cappy told John something truly unsettling. She said he wasn't from Earth, that he had been placed in his mother's womb by beings from outer space. And then, just as quickly as the encounter began, she led him back to the bush where he was eventually found by rescuers. Is this all just the product of a child's wild imagination? Perhaps. But the story doesn't end there. What makes this tale even more unsettling is what happened to John's real grandmother just a year earlier. Kathy had been camping near Mount Shasta with a friend when something strange happened to her too. She woke up one morning face down in the dirt, out of her tent and sleeping bag, with a strange puncture wound in the back of her head. Kathy, a grandma in her 50s who would never sleep outside her tent, was violently ill and too sick to even pack and go home. She initially thought it might have been a spider bite, but it took her a very long time to feel normal again. She experienced a loss of creativity and felt emotionally numb for weeks. Her friend, who had been sleeping in his camper, also had a similar puncture wound on the back of his neck and was violently ill. They had been in separate sleeping areas, yet both experienced similar symptoms. Before they went to bed that night, they noticed red eyes shining through the trees in their flashlights. They initially thought it was a herd of deer trying to reach the river and didn't think much of it. But now, Kathy wonders if it was something else. Adding to the strangeness, they realized there was almost no wildlife around. No birds, no butterflies, not even bees. The only animals they saw were 2 crows that seemed to watch them closely. The timing of her experience, combined with John's story, is too strange to ignore. The more you look into Mount Shasta, the weirder things get. The mountain has long been a hotspot for legends and mysterious encounters. Native American tribes in the region have stories about spirits and giants inhabiting the mountain. And in more recent years, there have been countless reports of strange lights, UFO sightings, and even supposed underground civilizations like Lemuria, which some believe still exist beneath the mountain. Some speculate that John's strange encounter could be linked to something paranormal, an extraterrestrial presence, a government cover-up, or even beings from another dimension. Others suggest a psychological explanation. The trauma of being lost in the woods caused John's mind to create an elaborate story to make sense of his fear and confusion. But John's story isn't the only one. There have been multiple cases of children disappearing in national parks under similarly strange circumstances. In many of these cases, the children are found alive. But when they return, they tell stories that are hard to believe. Stories about shadowy figures, glowing beings, and strange underground places. It's easy to dismiss these as the fantasies of young minds, but the consistency of the details across different cases is what makes them so intriguing. Why do so many of these children describe similar experiences? Why caves? Why strange figures? And why the feeling of being led or guided by something not quite human? Mount Shasta itself is a place that seems to invite mystery. With its towering peaks, dense forests, and hidden caves, it's a location that feels like it's out of time, like there are secrets buried within its depths that we're not meant to understand. So what do we make of John's story? Was it simply the vivid imagination of a young boy who had been through a terrifying ordeal? Or did he encounter something beyond our understanding? Something lurking deep within Mount Shasta's shadows? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a journey into the paranormal. Have your own Mount Shasta stories or theories? Share them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe in the shadows.